What's up, y'all? We have a fun one today. We have Leigh Brown on the pod. She is a successful real estate broker, best-selling author, mentor, coach, and all-around amazing advocate for agents and NAR in the space. And you'll see that her passion and her ability to entertain really comes through. So it's a fun conversation. And you can really see her passion for helping clients and being an advocate for the real estate industry as a whole. She came via Andrew and Sarah Wilson out of WS and Specs, Wilson and Sons, out of North Carolina. So I'd follow them on Instagram if you don't already. They're great for the industry as well in terms of creating great, engaging content, and they're just an all-around great company. But this episode, we dig in and we hear from someone who has probably the best vantage point in terms of an agent's perspective on the recent NAR settlement. So she's got a great perspective, and she's been creating content for a long time and really creates amazing content in the space for realtors and NAR and everything related to that. So hope you enjoy the conversation with Leigh Brown. All right, everybody, we are rolling. Welcome to another episode of Spectora Spotlight. And today we have Leigh Brown from Concord, North Carolina. And we met through Andrew, basically. Andrew Wilson, big friend of the program, friend of Spectora, introduced us to you. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for having me on. But if you're going to say Andrew, you better say Sarah.
We got to say Sarah.
She's the queen of their marketing campaign and the glue that holds that inspection business together.
Exactly. And if you're on Instagram, Home Inspectors, you need to, they're a great follow. The content they put out is top notch, and Sarah's personality is unique in this industry. You got to check them out. Well, welcome. I think everyone had said the last time we had a non-home inspector on, they said it was one of the most helpful episodes. So really appreciate you joining, because with everything going on, I think different perspectives are what help home inspectors out a ton, as opposed to just the echo chamber. But you have a broad range of perspectives and experience. So if you don't mind, I would just love the audience to kind of hear a little bit about your background and kind of what you do in the real estate space.
Sure. Well, I'm an independent broker owner in Concord. I've been in the business 24 years. I'm the daughter of a retired realtor and granddaughter of a builder. So I know far more about houses and construction than most realtors ever will, simply because I've walked those walks myself. I've also served in every capacity in the volunteer space. I've been the vice president of the National Association of Realtors, the president of the North Carolina Realtors, and I'm very heavily involved as a trainer and speaker in the real estate space. And I am the most requested speaker in real estate and trainer. So I've spoken in 49 states and on 5 continents. So I'm very broad-based when it comes to real estate, and I like to know what's happening out there so I can bring that knowledge back to Concord and do a great job for my agents and for my clients.
That is amazing. And so, we're obviously blessed to have you on, because there's a lot of inspectors right now that only read a headline maybe about the NAR stuff going on. Half, I would say, haven't even done that. And so I appreciate you being honest, because maybe we can just go super high level and get right into it in terms of what actually has been going on. And then we can brainstorm and maybe pontificate later on in the episode in terms of implications. But if we go back to, say last year even, or before that, how would you characterize kind of what went down and kind of like presenting it to home inspectors in terms of what actually went on with the NAR suit and settlement?
Well, this has been going on for several years. And in fact, this is only one sector of the class action lawsuits that are going up against agents. And frankly, for any inspector who's reading headlines and not reading the article, that's no different than one of our buyers seeing there's 18 items on the summary and panicking because they didn't go in and read all the summary items to figure out if it's really worth being upset about, or if it's things like weather stripping and a raised nail on a roof shingle. So you've got to really pay attention to what's going on underneath. And as anybody knows, class action lawsuits are a money grab by lawyers. They don't benefit the consumer. They don't benefit the plaintiffs. They only benefit the lawyers who file them. And in this particular case, the realtors, I don't think, did a good job of telling the story of what exactly it is that a realtor does for the client, which one of those things is provide a recommendation to a reputable home inspector so they can figure out what they're buying and understand what the to-do list looks like, even if the seller won't fix it, that they walk into it with a higher level of knowledge. And The reason the lawsuits were found against us is a couple of different stories that were told poorly in the testimony, but also because we currently have an administration in DC that's determined to destroy real estate. And this is something home inspectors should be paying attention to, because when the Biden administration 2 weeks ago, we're recording this the second week of April, when the president and the press secretary made comments about realtors needing to give up commissions so that home prices could come down and calling real estate commissions junk fees, every home inspector should be alert to that and saying, wait a minute, those realtors work to get paid. I, as a home inspector, want to be compensated for my work as well. And as realtors go, so go inspectors, so go surveyors, appraisers, and lenders on the local level. Everything is a very intricate ecosystem, and this class action lawsuit seeks to upend that in favor of virtual companies, in favor of websites. And it's pretty astonishing, this outright assault on property rights, which is what it boils down to. So as much as you may be listening to me and you're thinking, but Leigh, I don't think I agree with you politically. I don't care if you agree with me or not. That's not the point. This could be any administration, but when there is multiple messaging coming forward that says real estate agents are bad, that's not good for the individual homeowner who's thinking, I don't know what to look at in this house. And we help them figure out the area, the comps, if it's going to fit their lifestyle. As a home inspector, you help them figure out what exactly they should know about the heating and air system. What should they know about their standing water in the crawl space? What should they know? We educate people. That's the main thing that the realtor does and the home inspector does. We do those things together. We say pros, cons, and difference. And that's where these lawsuits are very inaccurate. So you've got to be paying attention. And for all home inspectors who are watching and listening to this, talk to your agents, find out what's got them upset, because part of my value is the Wilsons. Because when somebody calls me, they know that I have a list of people that are fully licensed and they've got the right insurance and they've got a set of eyes. And they also are the first ones to say if they miss something, because they're not perfect. And I don't want perfection. I want somebody who's honest and accountable. And in fact, one of the videos we ran on Instagram, I'm an old person. I'm older than the Wilsons are. I've been in the business longer than they have. Doesn't mean I know the home inspection side, but I know a blown seal on a window when I see one. And I felt like Andrew had missed it. So he, on a Saturday morning, met me back over there so I could find out if I was wrong or if he'd missed it, because I'll accept either outcome. He looked at it and then he said, I think you're right. We got a bag of frozen peas out of the freezer to show that you can actually, that's how you can test a seal on a window. And for those of y'all that are watching and listening and don't know that trick, that's why you follow the Wilsons on social media, because you can swipe all this information. And then as it turns out, I was right. And so we adjusted the report to protect the client, but it was our professional relationship that allowed the two of us to say, wait a minute, let's go back and look at this again. And that's what's completely wrong in all these lawsuits, is that the consumer should have a team protecting them. And you don't just buy your biggest investment on an app. I don't even like buying things on Amazon because Jeff Bezos makes too much money, but I'm certainly not going to buy a house that way. There's too many factors involved, and the government doesn't understand it, because frankly, they're probably a bunch of renters. Let's just be honest, except for all the elected officials who own 14 houses and make money off of us. But that's a different discussion.
Right. Right. I'm very fascinated by the bigger picture, like you said, of like the current administration's view on agents, because that's the bigger game that I think a lot of people are missing. A lot of people in our industry are missing.
I mean, honestly, what seller that we've ever met, if you own a home and you suddenly don't pay your agent, and so there's a $10,000 savings there, are you really going to drop your price by 10,000? Or are you going to be the seller that says, whoop, whoop, I'm pocketing an extra 10? This is not going to solve any affordability crisis. It's just going to make it harder for buyers, because they won't know about the area and the neighborhood and if it fits their needs, and they won't know how to find a reputable home inspector or a lender or appraiser. And so it just upends the process and saves nobody anything. It's just kind of, it's not a logical argument. And so for anybody back out there who's thinking, just take 2 steps back and critically think your way through it. which is hard for people right now because we're in this politically charged environment where everything turns into a red versus blue thing. I don't want you to do that. Step back and say, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right, because also, where are the other elected officials on the other side to fight for us? We're not seeing any of that. There's a coalition that says real estate bad. That's not good.
Exactly. And this, not to go on a tangent, but I think it takes us into this space where we're already as of everyone wanting to be polarized, right? So it's like good, bad. And I was an agent for 5 years here in Denver, and I remember working really, really hard, showing like 80, 90, 100 houses to some people during that environment. Remember when no one could get an offer accepted? And I just remember being like, I'm gonna lose money on this deal basically on an
Or
hourly basis.
gas money, the time you spent, you're pouring into your expertise, you're pulling the comps to write the offers, and then all in hopes of one day getting paid.
In hopes, and not to mention the emotional toll, because a lot of times these are friends, these are family members, and you really ride that with them. And so to paint, I think, anything with a broad brush, I would urge everyone to like not fall into that trap, because even talking to you and getting to know you, it's like your knowledge of the home, like that's a ton of value there, that even before the inspector comes in, the buyer has a head start on what the home is and kind of pitfalls and what to look out for. So yeah, to make any blanket judgments come, whether it's July or later this year, I really hope there's more thought put into it than maybe. But I know that's asking a lot, right? Out of any judgment.
Well,
Um,
but since we're probably not going to see a lot of movement from the DOJ, we're not going to see movement from lawyers, because what incentive do they have to listen to us? They are disincented to listen to us.
True.
What it means is that agents and their partners in their business, such as your home inspector partner, we've got to figure out how we put a better message out to the public that says, don't listen to them. We live here. We know our houses. We know what happens in these markets. And so, like, between Denver and Charlotte, one of the biggest differences is we have a huge issue with wood destroying insects.
Mm,
And one at a time you called it a termite litter until we have all these carpenter ants and powder post beetles. So it's a wood destroying insect thing. Your scenario out in Denver is wildly different because you don't have the humidity we have here. So for the buyer who's listening to all this noise, you should realize very quickly there is no national real estate market. There is no national real estate anything. It's about your local people. And when all of us have this very busy lifestyle that we're in right now, where we have a poverty of time, one of the best things you can find is that professional realtor who's got the professional team behind them to say, we'll help you right here with things that make sense right here. And we just have to tell that story more effectively and just neighbor by neighbor, the same way Sarah does. I mean, she's so gifted on Instagram with connecting, the chickens that they're raising and the kids, and then she supports downtown businesses in addition to all the home inspection stuff. So she's building connections with neighbors who then organically come to her and Andrew and say, hey, we have a question about house things and a question about repair things. And that's where the long-term ability to sustain a business is going to come from. It's going to come from providing value and teaching people to ignore the mainstream media, which you should have been doing all along.
exactly. I think that's a recipe for groupthink and just naivety. Just seeing and believing what you see. Um, do you believe there will be a small flush out of what I would say the small minority of agents that truly don't add that extra value, that don't take pride in kind of like being the holistic relationship manager? And is that a bad thing if it's the more of the fly by night ones? Not that I'm throwing them under the bus. I
I
will.
mean, I think we're going to lose some. I wish they were all the fly by night ones, though. But some of the fly by night ones who don't give a rip, they'll stay in because they're they're not ashamed to be mediocre, and that of course exists in every profession.
True.
I think we'll lose the ones who aren't strong negotiators, who don't have the ability to ask for the business, which is a classic sales skill. Ask for the business. And there's a lot of agents out there who, because of the market you've already mentioned, where you had all these multiple offers and you're just writing offer after offer after offer, you're not really thinking about it and crafting an offer. They're just throwing spaghetti up against the wall. I don't know that they'll all survive.
Mhm.
And also in an inflationary environment where it's so expensive to eat and it's expensive to keep a roof over your head and gas continues to go up, I just don't know that we have as many agents that are going to continue to pour in hopes of one day getting paid, like the way it's traditionally been set up. I think we're going to lose some that just look for a more stable job with some paycheck
Sure.
to it. But I think that with the way it shakes out, one of my fears is we lose a lot of the early career agents. Like, I'm old, my phone's going to ring anyway because I
Right.
have the longevity here. People know I have expertise. But there's a lot of good 2 and 3 year agents who are just getting going
And
and they're
hungry, and they
excited, they're
want it.
hungry, they do the work, they're trying to get more knowledgeable, but because you're looking at a world where we're being attacked about compensation, at the same time, there's nothing to sell. And so we had these agents that were at risk because there wasn't enough inventory to sustain them. And now they're being attacked. I think some of them will just say, this is too hard. And it's interesting, if I look at the home inspector market, it's one thing that's worried me over the COVID era is how many agents got their buyers to write offers with no inspection contingency, and they waived the whole inspection process. And we didn't do that as an office. We're like, no. I mean, even if the seller won't fix it, you have to know what you're buying. A lot of agents didn't do that, and so we lost a lot of home inspectors over the last 4
Yeah.
years because even though we had transactions going on, a lot of them eschewed the inspection. So it's fits and starts on all of these angles in the business. I think the best inspectors are going to find out how to support their agents. The best agents are going to pull their inspectors, lenders, appraisers, surveyors in with them as a team and say, this is what we provide. But that means the agent who didn't figure out how to build a support team because maybe they didn't think they needed it. Maybe their arrogance got in the way of saying, I know a lot about houses. Leigh Brown does. I'm still not a home inspector. I'm never going to pretend to be one, but I'll say, let's ask Andrew about this item over here. That's who's going to survive. And so I do hope that the really good agents who haven't gotten their feet under them will just go all in with information and knowledge, and they'll get that discipline going. They'll get the hustle, they get the fire in their belly and say, dadgummit, I'm going to survive. I just, I think we probably lose over the next 2 to 3 years. I bet we lose maybe 10% of our agents, if not more.
Mhm. Yeah, and the strong will survive, like you said, the ones that, whether it's supplementing with a part-time job or but still being all in, because there's
And no shame in that, by the way. Can we toss that in, Kevin? I mean,
yeah,
there's no shame in an agent getting a job to keep your family provided for while you figure out how to survive a commission world. I mean, in our market, we have one of the Amazon distribution centers. I know some real estate agents who that's their workout. I mean, if you're
yeah.
throwing boxes around, you're gonna be cut. You got upper body workout, and you get paid. And
Benefits.
frankly, yeah, they do have benefits. We don't have that, so no shame in that. The only people I feel should get out are the ones that don't care.
Right.
Like they take it, whatever. Somebody calls me, wants to sell a house, just throw it out there, throw an offer. They are not thoughtful about it. I want to keep thoughtful people in this business,
And
even if
that's
it
the
takes 2 jobs to do it.
well said. And that's the beautiful parallel with inspectors and agents. There's a lot of similarities because there's some inspectors don't care. We'll do it for $100, $200, give you a crappy report, not add context, not guide the homeowner. And we don't want them to stay. We'd rather them flush out, right?
If
But the
keys
new
go away.
but the new guy that's a firefighter on the side and doing this because he cares and wants to grow and help his community, we will support them 1,000,000%. We want to lift them up.
And honestly, that fireman's probably a power washer guy on the side too. So he's looking to do a couple of things. And frankly, my homeowners would be happy as they could be if they suddenly found out that Andrew had the ability to pressure wash the driveway for them. I
Yeah,
mean, no, Sarah, you don't have to start that business just fully loaded. I'm just saying
but
it could be helpful.
can I get your opinion on that? Because this is a good thing to riff on. Home inspectors are notoriously worried about the appearance of conflict of interest, and some of them will not offer a service because they're worried about the homeowner accusing them of self-dealing, right? Whereas as a former agent and multiple home buyer, I cared about convenience when I was in that space. I was like, oh, you can power wash the house too? How much? Can you do it today? I didn't care if it was the same company.
Me either. I'm the same way
I was
because
curious from your perspective how you view that with
it
buyer.
depends on what it is, right? So if the inspector wants to put a chimney liner in, I know the chimney liner business is the most corrupt thing in home improvement because you call a chimney inspector out, he'll be like, yeah, needs a liner. Okay, so I know how shifty that is. But if he's out there and says, yeah, for $800, I could do all of this weather stripping and caulking and stuff if you want me to, right?
So
And so
helpful.
if they say no, who cares? I mean, it's not like they're saying,
Yeah.
I'll fix this, and just as long as they're not gross about it. But hey, caulk is one of my favorite ones. The average human can't do a straight bead of caulk. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want. You can't do it.
I'm still, yeah, it's crooked. I'm off. Yeah.
I'm
I've
not
tried.
patient. You have to have a certain level of patience to do that. My husband can. He's an engineer, so he's wired to be
Got steady
detailed.
hand.
I'm distracted. So if my guy's out there looking over a house that I'm purchasing and says, I can knock this stuff out for you, I'm like, how much? So I'd say it just depends on your approach. And I know you can't put it in the report based on your state laws, and we don't want you to put it in the report. But while you're talking to my buyer, if you tell them, I'm glad to be a second quote for you, I mean, be a second quote. And then they could say yes or no.
Yeah. I like it. And I wanted to hear you explain that because to me, value add and convenience are very different from I have a radon mitigation company and I'm going to keep feeding that. And like if you're ethical, I don't think there's much to worry about as a whether you're a realtor or a home inspector.
Okay, so can you fake a radon test? I mean, it's 4.0 picocuries per liter of air. So if you're doing a mitigation system, can you juice those numbers? Is that like steroids for a house?
Right. And yeah,
Hope not.
if you call it like you see it, it's okay to also fulfill some of the handyman work, things like that. And so I think we are in a leaner era though of like how else can we all add value? And I think that's a good narrative to have out there for realtors and inspectors. I have a question for you on the buyer side because this might be a simplistic view, and I'm glad you mentioned how reductive it is to just say, "Oh, home prices will come down and everyone will benefit because everyone will make more." It's like this very simplistic view, right? So let's throw that out. So with buyers, I worried that if these changes resulted in buyers now having to pay a fee to their agent, that increases their costs. That might not be great for leftover money to pay for a home inspection. How do you view any potential changes to like buyer costs? Because it's already damn near impossible for buyers in some areas and some demographics to buy. More costs for them might not be a good thing.
No, it's a misunderstanding of how the money works. And frankly, I think a buyer will be able to buy a home inspection no matter what, because most home inspectors have online payment options. You can use a credit card for it. You can't use a credit card to pay your real estate agent. That's not a process that's accounted for in the mortgage rules. With our veteran buyers, there's a huge problem because there's a rule in the VA home loan program that a veteran cannot pay their own agent. It must come from the other side.
Mm,
So as the rules change, if a seller says, I will not pay the buyer's agent, and the buyer's a veteran, well, now they either have to go without an agent or just use a dual agent, which I have major conflict of issues, I mean, conflict of interest issues with that. So for the buyer who's scratched up their down payment, they've gotten their credit score up. The bigger problem, and you may have seen it out there too, Kevin, is the deposits. So you have to have enough liquid cash to do a good enough deposit to win in multiple offers. Because many of my sellers, that's one of the ways we win multiple offers is with a giant deposit. Well, that's liquid cash money. And yeah, it's part of their down payment if they get through the process. But if they don't get through the process, that money's gone. How are you going to pay the agent if you're continually whittling away at your money? And for the ones who say that agents shouldn't be paid outright, well, the way it's traditionally been set up, the buyer's still paying it. It's just baked into the total number. Why is that bad? I just don't think it's bad. The argument was that it wasn't disclosed and it wasn't negotiated. Well, that's not true because in our market, everything's disclosed and everything's negotiated all the time. The number of buyers who call in asking us for a piece of the commission or for a rebate or whatever it is happens all the time. I get to say yes or no as a business owner. But the future of a buyer paying their agent, they should have the right to. That's a American bedrock. You should have the right to choose how you do this. Well, that's always existed. I do think that the ones who get hurt the most are the low down payment, scratching their pennies together people. And the worst part of it is those are the ones who need a realtor the most. They don't understand why they need a home inspection. Use new construction for an example. In the Charlotte area, we still have new construction you can buy. It's a first timer. Now it's on the edges of the metro area, but you can still do it.
Sure.
Our first time buyer is very drawn to that because the builder will help them figure out some special low down payment programs. And then they think, well, I don't need an agent. Well, who's going to tell that buyer to get an inspection on new construction? Builder ain't going to do it because
Nope.
they don't want a third party inspector in there. The agent, oh, I'm like, yep, I want them in there twice. I want pre-drywall. I want them at the final. I want them to go find the bowed stud and find that pipe behind the master shower that's going to do this when you turn the hot water on because they didn't attach it properly. And the builders are going to, I think, take advantage of buyers who don't have agents because then they can avoid the home inspectors too. So it just becomes a matter of rules have to get fixed. And this is something, again, my frustration with our bureaucratic overlords in DC, that VA rule needs to be fixed. I've been asking for that rule to get fixed since 2017, and they didn't want to fix it because they said we didn't have to, it's not a problem. Well, now it's on the table to be a huge problem for only our veterans. So that one group is going to be carved out. And then your other groups are going to be potentially carved out for lack of available funds because of different loan rules. And I'm really not seeing a lot of movement in DC to fix that because, again, you look at the messaging coming out, there's a big push that says, hey, Gen Z, just rent. You're never going to own a home. It's never going to be affordable. It's out of reach. Well, why would you tell people they can't do it? They probably can if they're talking to the realtor who can help them figure out what programs are out there, what houses are available. Then we get the inspector involved to make sure their money is sound and they're not buying a money pit. We can help them, but they're pulling us out of the way so they can't be helped. And so why would they fix the loan program? It's so multifaceted. It's hard to get your mind around that it's so much more than just, well, the 6% commission is dead. I mean, there was no standard. Like the fact that they keep yelling about it doesn't make it true. It's just confusing the consumer while they simultaneously don't fix the underlying problems.
There's so much in there. And confusing consumers is kind of the MO of the government, right? So they like confusing people. So first, you probably had a lot of home inspectors saying preach on the new construction inspections. A lot of our inspectors are doing wonderful with those. And if you're a homeowner watching, because I bet there will be some buyers watching this, new constructions need a third-party home inspection.
And it's pre-drywall. I can't say that enough. You need an inspector at pre-drywall, and the builder's going to tell you we build to code. Just hear what they say. They build to code. And the code is the lowest baseline. And the joke we like to tell is that code inspectors are failed contractors, builders, realtors, and inspectors. They went to work for the county instead, and they're a little bit grumpy. But they don't care if you're going to experience problems later, because the bowed stud is my favorite example. And if you're watching this, listen to me on this with pre-drywall. If you've ever been in someone's home, when the sun hits just right and the wall doesn't look flat, it's because there's a bowed stud in there. And so it's not straight, they're kiln dried. And so it might dry just like this a wee tiny bit. It's still to code. It's still a good piece of wood. It's just not perfectly straight. The only time you're going to catch it is pre-drywall. That's what a home inspector does. They look for those weird oddball studs, and we can tell the builder, fix it, and the builder will fix it. They will never go back in the wall and fix it later, though. So you have one chance, and you're the only one that can do it. You who built the house from the get-go, the fifth buyer 20 years down the road is going to cuss that stupid bowed stud that everybody has cussed for 20 years that you could have fixed for $200.
We'll definitely clip this and send it to all new buyers. Code is the bare minimum. They work for the county. They're incented to just check the box and probably move on with their day, right?
Depending on how they like that builder and that general contractor, and did they like the subs, and
Fair.
did the subs leave cigarette butts in the porta potty and ticked them off? And it's an odd subjective process to watch.
Yeah. And builders can't crank these out fast enough. And so they're probably incented to just get it done and move on as well because they're understaffed, right? Because of after COVID
Labor shortage.
labor
Well,
shortage.
quality labor shortage. Let's just say it's quality labor because
Fair,
labor
fair.
out there that's terrible.
Just like with contractors everywhere, quality labor shortage. This is all awesome information, by the way, for homeowners that are watching. For inspectors, you said they should go talk to their agents and pick their brain around what? Like, how can they collaborate better? How can inspectors kind of help with this? Like you said, better storytelling and value selling. Like,
Well,
what?
it's interesting. So most home inspectors, and I have to say most because Andrew and Sarah are so unique. I mean, they're
They really are.
unicorn in the inspector market. When I look at how I'm usually prospected as an agent and as a broker, they want to come to my office and tell me how you're going to be a great home inspector. Okay, so that's not going to help my business. You're just a yellow pages ad at that point. I want to know, are you paying attention to what consumer behaviors are, consumer preference? The fastest growing demographic of home buyers is single females. How do you speak differently to a single female purchaser versus a married couple? That's two different conversations because women are wired differently than men. And then God help us all, what if she brings dad with her? That's the worst thing to happen to any home inspection is dad coming along. So if you come to my office and say, this is how we approach dads, my agents, their ears are going to perk up because they're thinking, well, thank you. You can help me manage that specific process. It's a specific process. And then I want to know how you handle downsizers, 55 plus. How do you speak to a generation that is not going to text everything? So how are you going to communicate with them? Give us some really good information, then talk to us about what you heard in CE. So in North Carolina, our home inspectors do more continuing education than realtors do. Don't get me started on that.
Ooh.
And so what they find in their home inspection CE comes up in my inspections. The rocking commode was big for a few years. And for those of y'all that don't know, that's when the toilet is not sealed properly with the wax seal underneath. Well, we had a lot of inspectors that would go into houses and sit down and do this and try and rock it off its seal, thereby causing the seal to break. And so as an agent, I'm like, son of a gun, I didn't have a problem until you sat down and tried to find what was on the CE. But when my agents know what's on CE, we can speak to our clients about it. The anti-tip bracket on stove, classic example. It's in every state. I think it's all in your pre-built paperwork and websites. Mention the anti-tip bracket. All right, if you're a new agent or an agent who's primarily done new construction, you don't know what the anti-tip bracket fuss is all about. You don't even have little kids. You don't understand where it came from and frankly how stupid of an inspection item it is because I mean, unless that anti-tip bracket is in a stud, it ain't keeping that stove from falling. Plus, if your child is climbing around on the door to the stove, we got parenting issues too. But still, I don't want my buyers to panic over something that you were told in CE to write up. So come talk to us. Give us a top 3 things you learned in CE. That would be a great sales meeting for any inspector to offer to a real estate office, because then we can take that information, convey it to our buyers. Hey, this is what our inspector heard in CE, so this will probably come up on your inspection. Well, now their expectation is that those things will happen. So when they see it, what do they think? Oh, I figured they were going to say this. Their panic level is reduced. Whatever we can do to reduce their panic allows them to think logically. So you go back to the idea that women are the fastest growing demographic of home buyers. Women by nature are more emotional. Men by nature are more logical. It's not a broad brushing. It's just how people are. Well, when you can give somebody good expectations, it lowers the emotion so they can activate the logical side. And frankly, the same thing happens for the logical person. You told them this might happen, check, check, check. Your level of trust with them went up so much for a house you never saw, for a buyer you never met, over information that was started off as generic and became specific. So that's what I would love to see from a home inspector is how do you manage, how do you communicate, and then how do you support us with good information?
That's wonderful. And home inspectors, notice we didn't talk about electrical panels. We didn't talk about copper piping. We talked about, you said the word communication no less than 3 or 4 times in that. And I just want to highlight that because you're right. Home inspectors are logical. They work with their hands. they believe the rest of not even consciously, I think subconsciously think the rest of the world is that way. And I will say, even a husband-wife duo that is on a home inspection, speaking to the female more than the male a lot of times is key. And I think home inspectors, mostly male dominated industry, gravitate towards talk and shop with the guy. And I'm like, it's anything like me and my wife,
In charge here.
you need to be winning her over with the emotional side and the logical side. So I love how you frame that of like who you're choosing to communicate to, what you're choosing to even say. Those soft skills aren't taught a ton in our industry. We try and do a little bit in terms of trainings and whatnot, but
That's probably an untapped a way to explode people's productivity is the soft skills side of home inspection.
yeah, doesn't just get talked about a ton. I mean, they'll talk about drones and crawl bots like all day, but it's an area we need to
That ain't
focus.
going to calm down the lady in the kitchen who's in love with the backsplash and the countertops, but she's panicked over the window that's not operating properly.
Right. You've probably witnessed it done really well. The piece about home inspectors putting things into context for buyers, and then you've probably seen it not done well. Do you have any stories or any war stories around, just to help them understand just how important the conveying of the information is versus here's your report, I'm out.
Well, now I work with a lot of first timers because even though I'm a very established agent, my heart is with the people who need the guidance and they need to have their hands held because I really want to see them start that generational path to financial stability and
Yes.
the house that does it. And so I've got to keep them calm. The fifth time buyer, they're fairly easy because they understand why they want to own real estate. The first time buyer is still trying to get their head around it, right? So what I have found with them is education goes further than anything else. And so when you explain to them what the P trap is and how do you take care of that in an off season and you show them what the furnace filter is, it's different than the air registers. And you explain to them, buy the cheap little blue or the cheap white filter instead of the super allergen tippy top one, because that's going to wear out your system. When you give those real life, here's how you live here for the long haul. Oh, by the way, we should get the seller to look at the fact that the return temperatures aren't quite right. And I'll let your agent talk about that. But I want to tell you, my buyers, this is how you take care of your unit over the long haul. Put in the cheap filters when you pay your mortgage payment. That'll help you stay on track. The real life example mixed in with the information keeps the panic down. I want them to keep their panic down.
That's beautiful. And I love hearing that language because oftentimes we get home inspectors saying, how do I word these things? I know how to write a report, but like, how do I relate it to a human that's living in a home? I'm like, you probably live in a home. Think about how you talk about this with your wife and your kids or whoever.
Or yeah, your kid's buying their first house. What would you tell your kid? Because you know houses. You're not that dad. But if you are that dad, that's probably why you get another home inspector to come inspect your kid's house.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you want to be the dad that's following along, picking everything out and driving the agent up the wall. What are some other things home inspectors can maybe think about either doing or doing better, to be a better partner?
I
And that
mean,
could be
be available. Just be available. And I don't want agents to work 24/7 because they get burned out. I don't want my inspector to work 24/7. But if I can text you and say, my people have a quick question, if I know that you're out this weekend because you're taking care of your in-laws, tell me, have your little text thread of your best realtors. Hey, we're going to be unavailable for the next 3 days. I won't bother you. I will totally honor your time. And then I will bother you when you get back. And I will tell my clients, you're going to have to cool your jets for 3 days. The inspector's out of town. I can honor you if you tell me what's going on. But by that same token, if you didn't tell me you're out of town and I have a quick question, be able to respond, because as an agent, I'm only reaching out if my clients are burning me up.
Mhm.
And they're burning me up. We have a short amount of time to put out that fire before it becomes a blazing inferno that destroys everything. Just talk to us. Please talk to us. And just when I think about that availability piece, I get something under contract in the market we're in right now, these multiple offers. see what you can figure out with us. We will tighten up the time frame. I have figured out how to get my people to only show up at the end of the inspection so that they only hear the notes and they don't get in the inspector's way. That saves everybody time and frustration. As an agent, I have an obligation to make sure the homeowner's house is secure, but I don't want the buyers there for 3 hours. And so when we can work together to help each other, you get more productivity out of your hours. My clients can get the information they need, and everybody can get it all moving forward together. But also, I got to add one more thing. Don't be afraid to say, don't buy this house. I find that agents need sometimes the inspector to say, I wouldn't be buying this house. And they don't want to say it because a reputation and home inspection that you're trying to blow a deal up. I'm not asking you to blow a deal up, but I'll give you an example. This was probably 20 years ago. I had a young lady buying a house. It had a natural spring under it. So in the crawl space was a natural spring. My home inspector and I both told her, please don't buy this house. Please do not buy a house with a natural spring under. There is nothing we can do. You will always have moisture under this house. You will have the potential for fungal growth always. And she loved that little yellow house. It was yellow. And he tried so thoughtfully to say, he just didn't want to say don't buy it, but he said everything but don't buy it. I told him don't buy it. 6 months later, she said, I wish I'd listened. I shouldn't have bought a house with a natural spring because this house is humid all the time. And that was an inspector, obviously it predates the Wilson. So Andrew, don't get your feelings hurt. This is, you were still in high school or something. But at the time, I wanted my inspector to look her in the eye and say, baby girl, don't. I mean, give up your money. I wouldn't buy this house. So I don't want you to say it flippantly, and I don't want you to do it for less than reasons, but there are houses where you look at it and you think the band sill's gone. That's bigger than this buyer can handle. The fungal growth is through the house, making that beautiful black lace design, and they have little people with asthma. Help me with those situations. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't let an investor buy a house with a bad band sill or fungal growth in it. That's a different scenario, but it goes back to one of your skills is the soft skill of reading people and understanding different demographics. So when you understand the client, you may can even call me and say, I'm going to tell them not to buy this house. It's a hot mess. Prep me for that. We can all have the conversation together, but honesty goes right behind communication, communication, communication.
That's so refreshing to hear. Because yeah, I do believe there's a false narrative that inspectors are always worried about blowing up the deal, and new inspectors think no matter what, do not blow up the deal. But there's that feeling in your gut on certain houses where you got to talk about it. Come to you and just there's nothing hurt. There's no harm in asking you, hey, I feel really weird about this one. How do I word this? How would you word this?
Get the hair on the back of your neck standing up. Tell me that. Tell the buyer that we hired you to give us a third party opinion. And then the buyer can go ahead and buy it. That's fine. But they buy it with full information that there was a third party who told them they had reservations. And I'm okay with that. I think most agents are. We just want you to be thoughtful about it, not reactive.
Yes. Yeah. And inspectors, there's so many confident, high integrity agents that will be just fine if that buyer doesn't buy that house. There's going to be more, and I've been there. It's like, yeah, you work hard to show a ton and you find the one that you thought was the one, and then it's not. And then you're like, all right, we're back on the road again. um, Super helpful. I know inspectors will really appreciate that. New agents. So when new agents get in the business, you guys do your trainings with them. I'm sure you bring them up. Is it helpful for inspectors to try to educate them from the beginning? Do you guys do like new agent trainings that inspectors can come in and help them with like the basics and teach them from the beginning, or is that not really a thing anymore?
Well, we have an onboarding program. I can't answer for any other company because we're very tiny and so we're very hands-on. And so I like for a early career agent to go with a seasoned agent on the home inspection. So not to have a
Mm,
office meetings not going to be as impactful as go glue yourself to his hip and don't say a word. Take your little notebook and write some notes. Don't interrupt because every inspector I've ever known has a mental order and a mental list. And if you interrupt the order, you've thrown it off. They kind of have to go back to the beginning and start over because they had a plan and a process. So don't interrupt him. Go learn, go watch. And then if the inspector wants to talk to you and show you something, they can, but don't you say a word. And I just think there's a lot to be said for that apprentice mindset that wants to go drink it in without trying to interject. And God help us, those early career agents who think they already know everything because they got the license. And they're like, well, I bought a house once. Like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. You are in a different position now. So
Yes.
shut up and listen and learn. And I want them to go on I can't say it enough. I want them to go on a new construction inspection. I want them to go on a historic house inspection where, you may have leaded glass windows that aren't double pane insulated. I want you to go on one that's 10 years old because there's so many different house types and house ages, and they all have different needs and electrical panels, right? So if we see knob and fuse, well, that's a whole different ball game than these beautiful square D panels. My new agents need to go hear it as much as possible before they're in front of a buyer. It's the way I was trained. When I got in, my dad made me live in his hip pocket for 90 days before I was allowed to touch a buyer or seller. And I'm so grateful for that because it allowed me to have some language that I could use from him. I knew things from that home inspector who he's retired now. He was the best. I mean, he lives in a house from the 1700s, and so he knew the history of the county. So as an inspector, he was telling the story of the area while he looked at the house with those clients. I mean, that's something
Beautiful.
else inspectors could actually offer. Now that I say that, is don't be just housey. Talk about, the Wilsons talk about their chickens, right? Because who doesn't want home eggs? So when you start connecting to the people and connecting them to the community, you're also giving them permission to buy the house and make the repairs and make it all better. But that's a big yes on apprenticing. And if you want to come to the office meetings, that's great, but that's not the same thing as here's what to look for in the crawl space.
I love that as a tip. Yeah, offer that up, inspectors. Take a newbie along with you. School them, show them the way. Being a historian of the area, that's a gem. I think that's a tip I've never given inspectors of learn the history of an area because that connects, guess what, to the heart of buyers and it helps them feel part of the community. Love that a ton. All right. So for the last bit, I want to switch gears back to buyers and sellers because obviously that's such hot topic and one I think you have such expertise and knowledge and history of. Come July, maybe we don't see a ton of change right away, but are there things buyers and sellers you're anticipating them to kind of be asking about or wondering how things go? Because, and I'll give you context, my dad served 30 years in the Air Force, so the VA thing hits home with me, right? So I'm like, man, they're kind of left out in the wild here, which is a shame. It's like, where's the thought and respect for them? But yeah, will buyers be coming and like if they see a headline, what are they going to be coming and asking or thinking? Like, what are you anticipating in terms of their reactions, like buyers or sellers?
They're just going to want to know
What do I
how
do?
it's supposed to work, right? And so, like, North Carolina is lucky. We've had buyer agency by general statute. We have excellent forms. We've been explaining it anyway. The only difference now is a buyer may pay their agent out of pocket. And so the agent's job is to know how that plays in with the mortgage. But the way that I do it, I was looking for a sample on my desk. I don't have one sitting here, but I take the offer to purchase and I grab my trusty highlighter because I love highlighters. And one of my favorite home inspectors hands out highlighters. I'll just point that out.
That's a good
Great
one.
gift.
That's a good one.
I like that better than ink pens because everybody gives out ink pens and they suck. So don't give us sucky pink pens. So I will circle all the times money leaves their pocket. So I will tell the buyer in our consultation, here's how the deposits work. Here's where you pay for the appraisal. Here's where you pay for the home inspection. Here's where you pay for the survey. With a buyer, if you just tell them where the money's leaving their account, they can handle it.
Yeah.
I think where a lot of agents have missed opportunities is the buyer expected the down payment. They did not expect any other money to leave their account. They never heard of a survey. The lender probably didn't tell them about the appraisal being a separate expense because they just showed it on that general expense sheet. But the appraisal gets paid for separately. and the deposits have to be written with the offer. And I want my people to know all the times money leaves their account. Now we're just going to make sure we're including an item for compensation for the agent, but we're also offering them, they can hire us hourly or they can pay a traditional commission. And we showed the difference in risk on that. But and on all of our spreadsheets, and I think every agent should do this. We show what the cost of the home inspection is, ish. And it's always an ish because it depends on square footage and the age of the house and all those
Sure.
factors. But ish, you're going to buy a home inspection. Here's why. Ish, you're going to have to spend this for the survey and the home warranty and all those items. And I think a lot of agents have had spreadsheets for sellers. They haven't had one for buyers. Well, now it's just time to create one for the buyer too, so they're fully educated before they walk in the door. And for my office, we do all of this at the consultation before we go show a house. For any agent who's trying to do all of this education at a showing, you're hurting the buyer because they can't absorb a house and how real estate operates at the same time. Make it two different educational chapters in their book.
I love this. And there'll be agents watching this too. And I think that's like great advice for up and coming agents of how to navigate this. There's a decent upswell in our industry with pay at close for the home inspection. I was curious if you had thoughts on one way or another on buyers being able to pay at close for the home inspection.
Well, that's none of my inspectors because they don't want to release the report until that's been paid for. And I don't blame them
Sure.
because if a buyer crashed two contracts over whatever reason, and we could say it's the home inspection or the loan, but sometimes it's just that the app kicked up a new house and they like it better down the street. They think they only have to pay for the inspection on the house they bought. Well, that's not fair. The inspector did their work.
Right.
So North Carolina actually has a form called Professional Services Disclosure and Election. And we explain to the buyer up front at the consultation, you're going to hire an inspector, you're going to hire a surveyor, here's all the people you're going to hire. They get paid for at the time of the service. They are licensed professionals in their field, and they are responsible for their own E&O, their own insurance, and I'm not those people. And so I let them know you're going to hire all of them. I don't have the same expertise they have, and they're going to be compensated. And our form came to be because of people not wanting to pay for professional services. And so I don't think any home inspector should have to carry it to closing. I mean, I do because I undertake the risk of getting compensated, but y'all aren't commission-based risk people. You are charging a fee for a service that has been provided, and so make them pay it to get the report. I think it's a smart process.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think up until now, inspectors have been trying to do it on their own. And then the software providers like us were saying, okay, what if we paid you and carried that risk? Would that be of value to you? Because some inspectors had the theory that, hey, if someone paid at close, they could think more clearly about the services they needed, like WDI, radon, whatever. Hopefully they're adding those if they need them regardless. That's my perspective is like,
Well, if the agent would go over with them all of the possible expenses on a little spreadsheet like the lender does,
yep,
then you guys wouldn't have to front it till closing and the buyer could know going in, this is what I'm going to pay on my biggest financial investment I'm ever going to make. And I tell buyers this all the time, like, are you really going to shortcut yourself $500 when you're spending $500,000? Really?
right.
Okay, so no, yeah, you didn't need a well and septic inspection because you're on city water and sewer. You saved that money. You don't have to get a radon inspection. Charlotte and Concord, we have radon pockets around here because if you didn't know, gold was first discovered in the United States here in Cabarrus County, North Carolina in the 1700s. We are 100 years ahead of California.
Wow.
When it was discovered here by John Reed in the 1700s, a lot of farmers started digging up their land to look for gold. Well, we didn't have that much. So the mines filled in over time, which trapped the gases underground, which is how we have some pockets of radon and some that don't, because of course it's decaying uranium underground. So when you know those little bits and pieces, I know there's areas of town like you need a radon inspection because we're going to have to do a sub-slab suction reduction system. It's coming. But there's other areas where I'm like, if you want to, because you read it on the internet, you can. I'm not going to twist your arm about it. But that's where the agent's got to have some expertise to provide, to tell them spend it or don't spend it. But at the end of the day, the inspector did the work and should be paid for it. And if you're afraid to ask the buyer to pay you, then you've probably got to take a sales class or get out of this, because agents are having to learn that hard lesson right now. It is okay to be compensated for being a professional, but you're going to have to ask for it. And home inspectors are no different.
That's such a great lesson. And I love how you worded it too, in terms of buyers' expectations are everything, and setting expectations. It's like most things in life, right? Like setting expectations, and they come in knowing what to expect. There's less sticker shock with the home inspection. But you also just gave inspectors a great idea of like helping your agents with this communication if they're not like you and wonderful and have all this experience. It's like if they're newer or if they don't have that muscle built, help them with communicating how to set expectations for the buyer.
Well, make them a spreadsheet, right? So make us a spreadsheet of the average house in your area. The average house is 2,500 square feet. Well, that's going to be $695. Quit giving us a price sheet with all these little ranges on it. Well, it's up to this, and it's this and this and this and this. Just say on an ish house, on the average ish house, this much for radon, this much for wood destroying insects, this much for the home inspection. Just break it down, and then at the bottom put the big asterisks. It might be more, it might be less, but I have found that to be much easier to explain than all the different ranges, because sometimes we just make it too difficult.
I'm so glad you said that. 10 cents per square foot above 2,500, but under 3,500. Yeah, it's like, no, stop that, right? Is that a PSA for home inspectors? Let's stop that.
Just pick one damn number. Make it all $9.95. I don't care what size the house is. It's all nine. I don't care. Make something up, but don't make it difficult.
Great parting words. Leigh, I want to be respectful of your time. This has been amazing. This is packed full of information for literally anyone in the real estate space. Tons of years of knowledge and experience packed in here. So thank you very, very much for spending the time. And maybe we'll do it again if there's big changes. We'll see. Probably not, but we'll try to keep people briefed and up to date with this. If people want to find you, where's the best place in terms of following along with what you're doing if they wanted to get in touch?
Well, if you're following Andrew and Sarah Wilson on Instagram, then I'm showing up in their feed all the time because we play well together. So I'm Leigh Brown on any of these networks. And I'm also at leighbrown.com. You can always reach out and ask any questions. And I'll just say, if you're an agent watching this, you should know your inspector as well as I know the Wilsons. And if you're an inspector, you should know your agents well enough to put them in your social feed. So maybe y'all can build those connections a little bit more as you decide how you're going to build this business as a professional team. And so with that note, Kevin, thank you for what you're doing to support people like the Wilsons and great home inspectors. And I'm glad that you're bringing some realtor background into it too, because we can always learn a lot from shared backgrounds and how we can make things better for the consumers we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing like, I mean, the knowledge and wisdom you bring, I think inspectors are going to be craving more of this in terms of just the language and the way we think about the industry and compensation. It's also transparent, and we just need more talk about it. It's just not being talked about enough, like in these terms. We're relying on headlines, and that's got to stop. So, all right. Well, have a great rest of your day. I'll link to everything in the description for anyone wanting the website, social handles, things of that nature. You can find it there. So appreciate you.